Hello, I am Dr. Susan Dusinger, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the 5th annual Lynda D. Woodruff Lecture on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Physical Therapy. This lecture honors the accomplishments of Dr. Woodruff and challenges us to pursue progress in DEI with the passion, integrity, and humanism that characterizes Dr. Woodruff's legacy. This annual lecture is a collaborative effort of 6 organizations: the Physical Therapy Learning Institute, American Physical Therapy Association, the American Academy of Physical Therapy, the National Association of Black Physical Therapists, the American Council of Academic Physical Therapy, and the APTA Academy of Education. Delivered around Juneteenth each year, this event celebrates Dr. Woodruff by inspiring us to develop innovations and solutions to the vexing DEI issues in our profession and beyond. We hope the lecture and panel discussion this evening will be a catalyst for personal and collective action. Dr. Lynda D. Woodruff has been described as a trailblazer, a selfless leader, and a passionate advocate for social justice. She began a life of advocacy as a teenager in 1962, when she became one of the first 2 African American students to integrate public schools in Lynchburg, Virginia. She earned her baccalaureate degree and her graduate degree in physical therapy at Case Western University in 1971, and served first as a physical therapist at Memorial Hospital in Danville, Virginia, where she quickly recognized the devastating impact of health disparities on minoritized patients. That experience inspired Dr. Woodruff to expand her professional reach as a practitioner, researcher, educator, and mentor, all in service to those in need of equitable health care. In 1976, Dr. Woodruff was the first Black educator to be appointed as an assistant professor in the Division of Physical Therapy in the School of Medicine at the University of North Carolina. In 1984, she received her PhD from Georgia State University, conducting research on non-quantitative predictors of success in PT education that fit her drive to see equity and equality in professional education. A woman of many firsts, Dr. Woodruff founded and directed an award-winning minority faculty recruitment and retention program at Georgia State University, and developed the first post-baccalaureate physical therapy program in Georgia as the founding chair of the Department of Physical Therapy at North Georgia College. As a scholar, Dr. Woodruff received grants to support her research, published more than 30 manuscripts, delivered numerous national and international presentations, and served as a medical educator in Brazil. She was recognized with tenure at Georgia State University and served as a visiting professor at Alabama State University. As a leader, she was a co-founder of the Physical Therapy Learning Institute, a founding member of the American Academy of Physical Therapy, and she was pivotal in establishing and supporting APTA's original Advisory Council on Minority Affairs, its Office of Minority Affairs, and the PT Fund that continues to provide scholarships for minority students. For her accomplishments, she received APTA's Lucy Blair Service Award and was honored posthumously in 2023 by election as an APTA Catherine Worthingham Fellow. Dr. Woodruff's impact is cherished by many leaders in our profession, including our speaker tonight, who proudly regard themselves as Woody babies and who have been permanently influenced by the strength and depth of Dr. Woodruff's wisdom. Throughout her career, she persistently sought to increase the presence, voice, and impact of Black physical therapists in the profession. This lecture honors her passion and her expectation that we continue to pursue our DEI imperatives. Today, we honor her legacy with the 5th annual lectureship delivered this year by Dr. Julian Magee from Washington University. A panel discussion will follow, moderated by Dr. Rebecca Seagraves, and featuring comments from Dr. Wayne Brewer, Dr. Shannon Richardson, and Dr. Kalina Corvus. We know this will be a captivating and meaningful evening and hope you will join us for our full program. Tonight, I am equally honored to introduce this year's Lynda D. Woodruff Lecturer. A Woody baby himself, Dr. Julian Magee holds the inaugural position of Assistant Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the Program in Physical Therapy at Washington University in St. Louis. It is through this important position that Dr. Magee is leading the collective commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and contributing to the efforts of the university and our profession to create a better future for students and faculty and the patients they serve. Dr. Magee brings nearly 2 decades of experience in physical therapy and athletic training. Originally an athletic training graduate of the University of West Alabama, Dr. Magee completed his doctorate in physical therapy at Alabama State University. It was here that he met and was mentored by Dr. Woodruff, first as a student and then as a new faculty member. In the clinical world, Dr. Magee has served as a practitioner, administrative leader, and clinical instructor. In academia, he has served on the faculty at Alabama State University and as director of the Physical Therapist Assistant Program at Damar College in Nashville, Tennessee. Appointed in 2021 to his position at Washington University, Dr. Magee has added depth to this program's unique competency-based curriculum in areas that blend his broad-based clinical experience and his commitment to bring insight, inclusion, and innovation to the DEI&B space. Currently, Dr. Magee is studying the structure and impact of the DEI positions that have emerged within DPT programs, research that is funded in part by the Physical Therapy Learning Institute's Lynda D. Woodruff Professional Development Scholarship Fund, and supported by his participation in the grant writing and mentorship and education research program called GAMER. Dr. Magee's effectiveness in his current position has led to establishing a strategic plan for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, through which he leads a comprehensive array of initiatives aimed at cultivating a welcoming and inclusive environment for all stakeholders and visitors. His leadership in these areas was instrumental in Washington University's program in physical therapy being recognized with APTA's prestigious Minority Initiatives Affair in 2022 award in 2022. Dr. Magee serves in leadership and liaison positions within the School of Medicine at Washington University, is a trustee for the PT Fund through the APTA, co-directs NABPT's Emerging Leadership Program for Black Academics in Physical Therapy, and is a member of ACAP's National Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Commission's Task Force on the Culture of Belonging. Dr. Magee has generously offered his time and talent to be an advocate for increasing diversity in the profession and promoting a culture of belonging in every aspect of our work. Dr. Magee, we are thrilled that you have accepted the invitation to share your thoughts tonight and are certain that Dr. Woodruff would smile at your professional successes and celebrate your new directions in the Academy. She also would continue to expect all Woody babies and their colleagues to press on for meaningful and permanent progress in ensuring equitable education, opportunity, and healthcare. Dr. Magee.
Thank you, Dr. Dusinger, for that introduction. I have to pause to think that you were talking about me as you were speaking. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Julian Magee. He, him, his are my pronouns. I'm a Black man wearing a blue suit, a white collared shirt with a gold bow tie with blue polka dots, brown glasses, and I am extremely honored to have been selected to deliver the 2024 Lynda D. Woodruff Lecture on DEI. I would like to thank PTLI, AAPT, NABPT, ACAPT, the APTA Academy of Education, APTA, and most certainly my parents and all of my family, friends, colleagues, and former and current learners that have touched and impacted my career and my life. Dr. Lynda D. Woodruff holds a special place in my heart. She was my professor at Alabama State University. She was my professor, a mentor. Sometimes I refer to her as a tour mentor, and later a colleague. You never had to guess when she was in a building, let alone the room. I hope that I do her memory justice with the talk that I give tonight in her honor. Dr. Woodruff is the epitome of a transformational leader. Dr. Woodruff and Dr. Owen Cardwell Jr., pictured here after integrating E.C. Glass High School in Lynchburg, Virginia. I cannot imagine what it took to walk into a building with everyone standing around you, spitting at you, aiming to make you fight or just give up. Just because you want access, because you want a chance to prove that you matter and that your life matters, a chance to improve your situation in life and the lives of those around you. Dr. Woodruff's early life put her on the path to becoming a transformational leader. She was trained in nonviolence by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. She and Dr. Owen Cardwell Jr. broke down barriers when they integrated E.C. Glass High School in Lynchburg, Virginia. She continued to break down those barriers throughout the rest of her life, continuing to use the lessons taught to her by Dr. King to constantly push for change within the profession and society, to see, hear, and value those from historically excluded backgrounds, particularly those of African American descent. Now, the realities of doing DEI work. My truth, when I got the invitation from Dr. Rupal Patel to be this year's Woodruff speaker, I was confused, wondering if she had the right person. Then I was excited, I was nervous, and I was deeply honored. Then I had to face a hard truth, which was that I was not sure, and not just from dealing with imposter syndrome, but because I had become hardened against the work of DEI. The realities of doing DEI work is that it is not easy. It's hard, it's draining. It's to be in a perpetual state of madness. Being a Black person, a Black man in particular in DEI work, I feel the words of Baldwin ever so deeply. To be Black in America and to be relatively conscious is to be in a state of rage almost all of the time, and in one's work. And part of the rage is this: it isn't only what is happening to you, but it's what's happening all around you, and all the time in the face of the most extraordinary and criminal indifference. I received many messages congratulating me on being selected as this year's speaker. There was one that came to me and it said, "I wish you all the best, and I surely hope you will not talk about the death of DEI during your talk." This message stuck out to me among all others because surely that was the path that I wanted to follow. I had to think that this was somehow divine intervention. So being a person of faith, I had to do some deep reflection and find my why. To understand if I was just in a funk or had I truly succumbed to the whims of the current times and the attacks on DEI. Had I become a casualty in the war? I took heed of the calling of Dr. Van Hughes for my DEI fatigue, taking my RST. It was in the S or Sankofa where I imagined the conversation with Dr. Woodruff and what she would say to me in this moment, what she would demand of me that would challenge me to pick up the broken pieces of my hopefulness. This is part of the foundation of my talk this evening. My truth consisted of being disconsolate, disappointed, disenchanted, and disheartened. Physical therapy is the science of healing and the art of caring. As Laura Swisher stated in the 23rd Sarasoli lecture, as educators, we cannot forget that there is a science and an art to both healing and caring. The instinct to divide hard scientific and soft caring parts of what we do undermines a robust foundation for professional identity and professionalism. Healing needs both art and science. It is the art that focuses on the human skills, as my friend Dr. Carla Bell likes to call them, that this talk is rooted. The understanding of empathy and compassion that is needed to be able to handle human suffering and want to be an effective mediator in making things better. It is in the arts that I found myself looking to the words of Dr. King in his last book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? And in his sermon of the same name, delivered to the SCLC in August of 1967. As I listened to the sermon, it dawned on me that I needed to turn my discouraged state into one of divine dissatisfaction. It is not lost on me the irony and connection that led me to the words of Dr. King for this Woodruff Lecture, especially since it was Dr. King who taught Dr. Woodruff the methods of nonviolent resistance. So as I reflect back to my imagined conversation with Dr. Woodruff, just like the many we had in her office at Alabama State University, her first point for me would be to reflect, to look back when the fire was ignited and reignited for some, when the passion for DEI was red hot. That time I would call progress. Some significant event in physical therapy at that time, around 2020, were the ACAP listening sessions around race and ethnicity. They were changing the Black landscape of the physical therapy profession. They was moving forward the student experience and sophisticated insights to true progress. How racism and social injustice reverberates in the Black physical therapy community. We all wanted to do something after witnessing the murder of George Floyd. The 2020, the year of so-called racial reckoning in America. I was able to sit down with Dr. Sonora Simpson and discuss her extraordinary life and her experiences in physical therapy as a student, clinician, and educator. And that talk was broadcast throughout the physical therapy profession. In 2020, we also had the inaugural Lynda D. Woodruff Lecture by Dr. Gregory Hicks. Who do we want to be? Responsible stewardship of our profession. Dr. Hicks encouraged us to think about our responsibility to increasing the diversity of the profession. He taught us to think differently about diversity. He told us that we do not lose when we increase diversity, but we enrich the profession. He illustrated how the University of Delaware's PT program placed an emphasis on diversity, and it did not harm their ranking or create a decline in outcomes. Intentionality and the true commitment to DEI makes us all better. Also around this time, after the so-called racial reckoning, there was an increase in DEI officers within physical therapy education. The increase in these DEI officers should help to create ideas and spur innovation in leading the changes in the profession. These individuals are highly skilled and have great ideas on how to push these efforts forward. The individuals in these positions are doing amazing work and extraordinary work, sometimes in spite of not being given the support and power that their positions deserve. This list is not all exhaustive or all inclusive, so if I have left anyone out, it is my sincerest apologies. We went beyond words. We saw Dr. D.D. Matthews and colleagues challenge the profession through their article, Beyond a Statement of Support, Changing the Culture of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion in Physical Therapy. They taught us to move beyond just giving lip service to the problem. They provided thoughtful dialogue and were transparent about their own challenges and left us with a blueprint to begin transformation. They told us that we need action at an individual level and organizational level and at the professional and systemic levels. We should engage in deep and humble listening, educate ourselves, analyze disaggregated demographic data, scrutinize curriculum or programs for deficit-minded views of minoritized populations. We should empower emerging leaders, commit resources to the process. We were also challenged by our colleagues through calling out racism and crisis as the crucible for change in physical therapist education. We were challenged to use moral courage and social reconstructionism to transform physical therapy education. We were finally told that the habits of the heart were just as, if not more important than the habits of the head and the hands. We named racism as a crucial component to addressing health inequities and disparities and we spoke to addressing racism within our curriculum, even at the professional level. We saw an increase in the emphasis and importance placed on DEI, with Carbon Elliott being elevated to Vice President of DEI for APTA and the Executive Director of the Physical Therapy Fund. This followed the amazing work that was wonderfully led by Ms. Jonette Meadows. We also saw a creation of a DEI board and an increased diversity of leadership throughout the APTA and its academy. Amazing strides had been made, amazing work was being done, and amazing people were being put into positions and given seats at the table that were long overdue. Conversations were being had again, but this time there was some tangible and meaningful change. But those efforts were short-lived. In my imagined conversation with Dr. Woodruff, after she had me to reflect on where we were, we come to where we are now. And we move from that progress to a state of retrenchment. Throughout the history of the United States, times of great progress in the causes of race and ethnicity have often been met with fierce opposition and resistance. This is known as retrenchment. Whenever there has been progress, there has been retrenchment. Reconstruction, followed by Jim Crow, the civil rights legislation, and then legal policies and challenges, and even societal changes like white flight after. And then the so-called 2020 racial reckoning and the attack on DEI and critical race theory. In her 2021 Woodruff address, Dr. Charlene Portis asked us if we were ready to change. I would say that she saw the winds of opposition and the waves of challenge coming as she warned us to examine whether we are truly willing to embrace the necessary changes to achieve meaningful progress. She challenged us to build sustainable practices that could withstand the furious fight to come. She reminded us that if we did not center DEI in all that we do, then we would DIE. 2022 brought Dr. Lisa Van Hoos's diagnosis of DEI fatigue, recognizing the exhaustion that can arise from continuous efforts to address systemic inequities, while also providing us with an intervention in the form of RST, representation, Sankofa, and trustworthiness. This intervention serves as a reminder that representation matters, that we must learn from the past to inform our present actions, and that trustworthiness is crucial in building authentic and sustainable relationships. It is not lost on me that in just 2 years after that supposed racial reckoning of 2020, that Dr. Van Hoos recognized that we were already fatigued. We were already sick and tired. Like Dr. Portis, she had the foresight, knowledge, and wisdom to warn us that something's not quite right. As my folks would say, something is wrong with that poor baby. We got too comfortable and we celebrated too soon. We got apathetic after winning a few small battles, not realizing that the war was just beginning. In her talk, Dr. Van Hoos highlighted that we are not only fatigued, but some of us do not have the heart for this work. I want to take that a step further and say that some of us and some of those within the profession and society not only do not have the heart for this work, but have a heart against this work. We saw the Supreme Court rule against race-conscious admissions in the entry to college. In a 6-3 ruling, the court held that Harvard and UNC's admissions programs, which account for race at various stages in the process, violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. The work of Edward Blum, that has been out to take down affirmative action in anything related to DEI work, scored a huge victory here. Blum has been working since the 1990s to remove race and ethnicity from education, and now he is proven successful and has turned his attack towards corporate America. In a very recent ruling, his latest victory was against the Fearless Fund. The Fearless Fund created grants for Black women business owners. Recently, an appeals court found that the Fearless Fund violated Section 1981 of the 1866 Civil Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of race when enforcing contracts. The Reconstruction era law was originally intended to protect formerly enslaved people from economic exclusion, but anti-affirmative action activists have been leveraging it to challenge programs intended to benefit minority-owned businesses. This is the state that we find ourselves in as it relates to the attacks against anything DEI. Anti-DEI legislation has been introduced in 30 states, along with 100 anti-DEI legislation bills. Iowa has the most restrictive law thus far. And the U.S. Congress has introduced the Educate Act to ban DEI from being taught in medical schools. These bills could impact a wide range of initiatives, from defunding DEI offices and officers to removing diversity statements from hiring practices. The Iowa law impacts the budget and includes a list of widely contested opinions that institutions cannot hold a position on, including implicit bias, cultural appropriation, allyship, transgender ideology, microaggressions, anti-racism, systemic oppression, social justice, gender theory, and racial privilege. Again, the Educate Act would cut off federal funding to medical schools that force students or faculty to adopt specific beliefs, discriminate based on race or ethnicity, or have diversity, equity, and inclusion offices or any functional equivalent. Retrenchment is very real. As we look at physical therapy specifically and belonging in PT, learners who identify as racial and ethnic minorities have been found to find less satisfaction with their PT education, lower confidence and preparedness for entry-level practice, a higher rate of mistreatment than their peers, higher rates of exhaustion and disengagement, but they have greater empathy and interest in working in underserved communities. These are two components that lead to academic burnout. Racial and ethnic minority respondents reported having greater empathy and a greater interest in working in underserved communities. If we can pause for a moment and just think about the people who are most likely to go out and work in underserved communities, are leaving PT education already burned out, how long will they last in the fight to transform the healthcare society? How will we then be able to say we are working towards eliminating health inequity and health disparity? In addition to not belonging, we have large numbers of attrition rates for individuals who identify as Black and Brown, particularly for those who identify as males from these groups. As I'm reminded of that message that I received about the hope of not talking about the death of DEI solely, I would be committing a grievous action to not mention the current environment and my cause of discontentment. I cannot help but talk about the onslaught and politicization around DEI and its concepts. I must wonder how we will fight and win the war that is here right now. How will we prepare ourselves for what is to come? I must ask, where do we go from here? Revolution. Divine dissatisfaction must be our catalyst to stay in the fight to transform the health of society. It is that inner voice that tells us there's more to be done, more to be achieved, and more to be experienced. It is a feeling that arises when we recognize that we are not living up to our fullest potential. This is the legacy of Dr. Woodruff, staying in the fight. I would say that Dr. Woodruff held divine dissatisfaction as she lived and breathed. It drove her to stay in the fight for what was right until she departed this world, to continue to push back and challenge even when things look great, to know that even though times and people change, we must never rest on our laurels and not be diligent in creating change for all. Divine dissatisfaction asks us, what kind of profession do we aspire to be? And what kind of physical therapist and human being am I? What is required of us to do what we all know is the right thing? In order to transform the health of society, we must take an imaginative leap to put us on new ground. In crisis as the crucible for change, we are challenged to use our moral courage and push the habits of the heart in propelling our profession forward to transform the health of society. We must embrace the work of the humanities as we boldly walk into being scientists and artists. In order to transform society, we must not only be able to treat the human body, but we must be able to recognize and walk alongside individuals in their suffering, understanding and addressing the ultimate human condition. In the 2023 Woodruff Lecture, Dr. Emmanuel John states that the ability of the physical therapy profession to offer services to all segments of our population is not maximized. He says that we are unable to reach all parts of society because our inadequately diverse healthcare workforce falls short of reaching all. When we think about divine dissatisfaction, we must think about these elements: to embrace self-reflection, set audacious goals, cultivate a growth mindset, represent empowerment and representation, and build community and coalitions. As we embrace self-reflection, I want us to think about what our DEI report card would say as a profession. What would our goals be? What are the strategies we will employ to transform society? And would those strategies work for the greater good of all? Focusing only on the science but not the art means we are doing half of what caused us to be a profession. Blaming learners for the shortcomings of academic institutions is counterproductive. Instead, we must critically examine our systems and structures, addressing the deeper-rooted issues that perpetuate inequities. This requires us to think differently, act differently, and adopt new approaches and perspectives. Be dissatisfied with not placing emphasis on the human skills, empathy, caring, and understanding of individuals that is required to be a transformative healthcare professional. We must set audacious goals. Again, who do we aspire to be? Transformation takes sacrifice, takes hard work, takes constant reassessment. Audacious goals do not allow for being stuck in satisfaction. We can settle for convenience, or we can be transformational, but we cannot do both. Complacency and mediocrity have no place in the hands of people who aspire to do great things. Good enough has never been great for anyone, and it rarely is good enough for most. Be dissatisfied with complacency. Be dissatisfied with mediocrity. Cultivate a growth mindset. We must embrace challenges and setbacks as opportunities to learn and grow. The push for competency-based education is a move towards a growth mindset within education. We should embrace having our learners see the beauty in failing, failing again, and failing better. We must be dissatisfied with arbitrary standards in the pursuit of technical perfection. According to the work of Shields mentioned earlier, today's learners struggle with embracing ambiguity. I wonder if the struggle with ambiguity is due to curricula and individuals who demand perfectionism and binary choices instead of understanding what is required of learners. Be dissatisfied with not being willing to give learners the benefit of the doubt, or not being able to recognize the value of learning differently. Be dissatisfied with not incorporating culturally responsive pedagogy into our curriculum. As it relates to empowerment and representation, we must make a seat at the table for historically excluded and marginalized individuals. Representation matters, and I will say it one more time, representation matters. We must hear, see, and value those who are not the most represented. Be dissatisfied with the lies that we are a colorblind society and that identity does not matter. Be dissatisfied when the value of our individual identities is denied. Recognizing that diverse identities intertwine is crucial. Our fight for equality cannot succeed without understanding the overlapping impact of race, gender, sexual orientation, disability, socioeconomic status, and other dimensions of identity. Embracing intersectionality as a foundation for our work will help create a more inclusive society. And we must build community and coalitions. We cannot go about this work without each other. Dr. John reminded us, the profession, that without us, we are incomplete. Power and privilege are things that we must share if we are to transform the health of society. To achieve true transformation, DEIB should not be treated as a standalone aspect isolated from the core of our programs or initiatives. It should be fully supported, empowered, and elevated throughout all aspects of our organizations, institutions, and communities. Integration of DEIB principles into the very fabric of our systems will ensure sustainable and meaningful change. Let's move beyond allyship to being accomplices in the work. An ally can send me help, but an accomplice walks hand in hand with me. Be an accomplice. Divine dissatisfaction is not about perpetual discontentment and dissatisfaction for its own sake. It is a call to continuously strive for personal and collective improvement, to make a positive impact on the world around us. This can be the catalyst for revolution in our profession and our society. As I close, I know that times are hard, and I know that some of you may be ready to give up and give in, but I challenge you to turn your discontentment into divine dissatisfaction. Time is finite, and we only have but so much. But if you are committed to the fight or want to be recommitted to the fight, I want to leave you with the poem that Dr. Benjamin E. Mays would recite to his Morehouse students. I've only just a minute, only 60 seconds in it. Forced upon me, can't refuse it, didn't seek it, didn't choose it, but it's up to me to use it. I must suffer if I lose it, give account if I abuse it. Just a tiny little minute, but eternity is in it. We have an opportunity as a profession, and we need each other. In this effort to pick up the broken pieces of my hope and wrestling with doing this work, I was reinvigorated by reframing the feelings with me and learning about this divine dissatisfaction. I care because I'm dissatisfied with having to justify my presence or the presence for individuals who have been historically excluded or are from marginalized backgrounds and who are not always seen, heard, and valued. I'm dissatisfied with having to do twice as much just to be accepted and still have my abilities and talent questioned. DEI does not mean that we are less than, that we are not capable, and that we do not belong. I'm more than dissatisfied with that lie. I'm dissatisfied, and I refuse to have to be a part of a profession or a society that will not recognize all parts of me. Be dissatisfied with me. Be dissatisfied with being told that to help another means that I must limit the progress of someone else. That is the legacy of Dr. Lynda D. Woodruff. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Rebecca Seagraves, and it is an honor to serve as the moderator for the 5th annual Lynda D. Woodruff Lecture and panel discussion. Joining me tonight is a panel of outstanding leaders in the physical therapy profession. Please note that my brevity of their bios is an invitation for you to view the full description of their backgrounds on the APTA Lynda D. Woodruff webpage for tonight's lecture. Dr. Wayne Brewer is a full professor of physical therapy and coordinator of the post-professional PhD program at Texas University in Houston. Dr. Talina Corvus is the assistant professor to the Education and Leadership PhD program and DPT program, and she is currently serving as the interim director of the PhD program at Pacific University in Oregon. Dr. Shannon Richardson is an assistant professor for the College of St. Mary's Blended Doctor of Physical in Omaha, Nebraska. And our esteemed speaker for the 5th annual Lynda D. Woodruff Lecture, Dr. Julian Magee, is an assistant professor and inaugural assistant director of diversity, equity, and inclusion for the program in physical therapy at Washington University of Medicine in St. Louis. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Less than 4 minutes into his lecture, Dr. Magee reconciles with 2 emotions after learning he would deliver the 5th annual Lynda D. Woodruff Lecture on DEI and physical therapy. Shares the feelings of gratitude he has to honor the life and legacy of Dr. Lynda D. Woodruff, a transformational leader. Then he describes that to do the work of DEI is to be in a perpetual state of madness. The paradox here is powerful. To feel joy at reflecting on your life's work, where it has taken you, and the doors you have opened for others. At the same time, reconciling this with the perception that to help a person from a historically excluded background means you have to limit the progress of someone else. To unpack this on our panel this evening, Dr. Brewer, we'll begin with you. At what specific point in your career have you encountered a similar paradox where your work in diversity, equity, and inclusion has been tremendously rewarding, yet has also put you in a state of rage due to the question of its legitimacy?
Thank you, Dr. Seagraves, for that question. And also just want to thank Dr. Magee for such an impactful lecture. In regard to your question, Dr. Seagraves, so times when my DI work has caused me a state of rage, I can think of about earlier in my academic career, myself and a colleague of mine actually had a grant to improve the recruitment and retention of minority students here in Texas. Now, keep in mind that Texas right now has some very restrictive laws for DI. So this was a time that preceded that. So what we would do is we would go around the state of Texas to various public schools to recruit minority students defined as African-American and Hispanic students to our program. And we had many successes. We also had many challenges. But the one particular challenge that I had was with one particular feeder school in which, because this was a grant and we knew this grant was going to end at some point, we wanted to establish a legacy with this school to continue to receive applicants from this particular school so we can allow at least the opportunity to review applications to actually improve our enrollment from students from this particular school. In the process of establishing this agreement, the individual at the particular school that I'm discussing basically had a notion about what we were doing and looking at it as sort of like a handout or sort of like a way to be dismissive of their students. And I certainly reassured this particular individual that certainly was not our intention, and that actually we recognize the excellence that this particular school puts out. The rage, or at least a disappointment in me, was the fact that this particular individual and the students were benefactors of our program, but it also had to make me realize and reevaluate how I presented DEI and how oftentimes DEI is misinterpreted and misunderstood around the world, around the nation in particular. And that if this particular individual students are direct benefactors of the program, and this person felt this way, then how would individuals who are not direct necessary benefactors would feel about DEI efforts. Recognize that benefactors of DEI is really everyone, and particularly the main stakeholder or main benefactor, which is patients, that really we all benefit from having a diverse workforce. But it was difficult to fathom that here I was trying to provide a vehicle that provide a legacy for these students, that this particular person of that school actually really questioned my intentions. That certainly evoked a lot of rage and a lot of disappointment in me, but also made me reflect on how I present future DEI efforts.
There's almost a feeling of being careful, tiptoeing. Dr. Corvus, when I think of the term, the Sankofa, this was the intervention that Dr. Magee reflected on from the 2022 Lynda D. Woodruff Lecture by Dr. Lisa Van Hoos. And that term that may be lost on the current audience who's not familiar with that lecture, and I encourage everyone to view that. But the term means Sankofa is reaching back to knowledge gained in the past and bringing it into the present in order to make positive progress. And I'm reflecting on what Dr. Brewer just shared. Will you, Dr. Corvus, kind of go through almost a present day use of Sankofa to resist that notion that DEI is taking away from someone else in order to benefiting another person, when in fact it benefits everyone, like Dr. Brewer so eloquently stated.
Yes, thank you. And that was exactly what I was thinking. What Dr. Brewer had said about these measures, these practices, these moments of progress we're trying to make, they benefit everyone. And Dr. Magee talked about this as well in your lecture, and I was still like taking notes while I was listening. And I think about this in two ways when I think about that concept of Sankofa and what it's meant to me in my own practice and how I think I use it in a modern way. It's really twofold. So one is kind of practically, logistically, and the other one is personally, right? And in both of those, when I was thinking about it, what I kept going back to was the phrase, there's that go back and get it, right? Go back and get that knowledge, go back and get what we have known. And I think embedded in there for me is also the concept of go back and get yourself when it comes to what are we really supposed to be focusing on in these spaces. So from a practical logistical standpoint, right? When people are pushing against DEI, when people are saying like, oh no, this, we don't need this, or this shouldn't be here, or this isn't benefiting the people that we have in our space, right? That you can kind of vault over that concept and say, okay, let's go back further then, right? Before we were using the term DEI, let's go back to what we knew before. We have bodies of research that show things. We can look at sociology, we can look at psychology, particularly non-Western psychology, right? We can look at all of these other areas of knowledge that we've gained, our own cultural experiences, and say, okay, well, we don't have to talk about that in these terms if you can't digest it at this time, right? We can go and look at other documents. We can go and look at other things we've learned in the past and still bring it forward and say, well, we still know that these practices help everybody. They help more people. And Dr. Magee, when you were talking about, the importance of centering the person, of that, the art and the science of what we do, right? The art of what we do is so intrinsically linked to the science of what we do. As physical therapists, clinically, sitting down with another person, our job is to understand that person wholly, right? That is how we transform society in the clinic, right? It's kind of like patient by patient. And that practice in that micro level, bringing what we learn in those interactions forward into bigger spaces, that is how we can, again, pull back from what we know, from who we are, and move that forward into like justifying what we're doing. And then on a personal level, I was thinking about how, to your point, it's exhausting work, right? We have practitioners and students going into professions and academicians showing up who are already tired, and go back and get it. Go back and get yourself. I think we spend a lot of time in these systems and structures and we forget. We learn how to function within them, right? We learn how to do that dance and how to speak that language, and we can sometimes forget to go back and say, but wait, but who am I and where did I come from? And what can I learn from the spaces where I have felt the most satisfied, right? If we're going to use that dissatisfaction to drive us forward, where have I felt the most satisfied? What can I learn from that place? What can I go back and get from there and hold on to as I move into spaces where I'm going to continue to push forward the initiatives of DEI and the initiatives of people who have come before us, right? What have we, there's inherent in all of that is what we've learned from them. So.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
I mean, I think honestly, when I think of divine dissatisfaction, I'm thinking of what are the consequences now on the DPT profession, especially in education. Dr. Magee just dropped stats that 30 states have introduced or passed 100 anti-DEI legislation bills. Dr. Richardson, what do you think are the direct consequences of this on DPT education?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Dr. Seagraves. I think that this also goes along with your first question regarding the questioning of the legitimacy of that type of DEI work and kind of to Dr. Brewer's initial response. And I think that that legislation, it's planted a seed of doubt for some people, and it really makes them start to second guess their efforts in the realm of DEI, and it creates some fear regarding pushback and retribution. I've had conversations with people about whether or not they should do something or how they brand a different type of DEI effort because of concern that there could be some sort of pushback. And I think that that's truly the goal of this type of legislation. Even if there isn't any direct retribution for someone, the fact that it makes them, that it sows doubt and it makes someone second guess those efforts is really, it's anything to kind of quell that progress that has been made. And I believe that any decrease in these DEI efforts could have a grave impact on the number of learners that are entering PT and PTA programs, and it will erode the support that they receive in getting through these programs and reaching graduation. As we all know, it has been a really slow and painstaking effort to make a just tiny modicum of progress. And as we often see, anytime there's some sort of progress, it's always followed by some sort of backlash or pushback. And I think that's what we're seeing with this legislation. And so I think at the end of the day, the real goal, the real outcome is that it's hampering those efforts, and it's even creating a small amount of fear. And this is really going to have a reduction in the support and the number of students that we see from those historically minoritized and marginalized identities.
Dr. Magee, that brings to mind the term you use of retrenchment, right? The backlash. And you shared that you received a letter that was encouraging you tonight to not talk about the death of DEI, particularly in this lecture that's intended for the physical therapy profession. But halfway in, you illustrated where the death of DEI was occurring in other sectors, specifically with college admissions after the 2023 Supreme Court ruling on affirmative action, and in corporations where funding programs that I specifically have benefited from. I would not have been able to start and grow my business without a fund that was dedicated to Black female entrepreneurs. Those are being blocked. And so I would like to know, and I know our audience listening would like to know, why did you feel it was important to inform physical therapists on where DEI initiatives are being threatened throughout the United States?
Thank you, Dr. Seagraves. And I want to speak to that letter. I really feel like it was one to say, well, let's be hopeful. Let's not focus on the negative here. And again, I feel like I have to be transparent. I still have my hope, and as the lecture showed, my hope is reinvigorated, but I have to also think about the realities. And we think about PT, especially for those who are in the education realm. I think we only think about it as in the academy and somehow we're safe, but it's also a business. We're a profession. We want to, and if we are really going to be able to think about the fight, if we're going to think about transformation and revolution, we have to look at all sectors. If it's happening here, it's only a matter of time that it will be there. So that's why I wanted to point out all the areas, not just from PT, not just education. We are centered in academics, and the walls of the academy around us are under attack. Then it will be our programs that are next. They will be at the door. If business to what you do and your wonderful work in maternal child health and pushing your business forward, then if you are a Black woman in this space, and we've just seen what happened to the Fearless Fund. So what does that mean? It's not just an attack on truly giving someone a grant. It is an attack on the progress for Black maternal child health. And therefore, it will perpetuate inequity and disparity. And if we don't know where to fight, then how can we know how to strategize? We look at every area, and I can see what they're doing in Texas. I can see what they're doing in Iowa. I can see what they're doing here, and I can try to find a plan. I can see what the Educate Act in the federal government is doing. Our own U.S. Congress is saying these things, and now proposing bills that potentially will have an impact on what we do. How can we transform society if we are continuing to say, under the guise of we're really trying to do it for all, but yet we're blocking some, when progress has never been intended for everybody? And when we see everybody get on board for progress, then we see the fight come against us, retrenchment, the pushback, and not just the pushback, it is made legal. It is structured. It goes back to the original systems. We try to make it about the law. And even looking at laws from 1866 that were designed to rectify the horrors of slavery, or to begin to rectify the horrors of slavery, are now being used to, again, push us against the margins and keep us out, to keep us, and I mean us, as from progress.
Dr. Magee, you hit a nerve. I'm going to tell you right now. When I think of over 50% of childbirths in this country are being covered by Medicaid, and then you went through burnout in the DPT educational realm, with students being the ones who are going after those underserved populations, but then the minoritized students being at the highest risk of burnout. To me, when I think of defunding DEI initiatives and DPT programs and other higher education programs, the people who are getting hurt are like what you said, Black maternal health, those recipients of our care. And people don't have that kind of scope. And so I want this to be a question that all of us, we really ponder on. And Dr. Brewer, I'll start with you. In universities, where DEI offices and budgets are being cut, where do you see an opportunity for educators and accomplices, I'm going to use that term, accomplices, to prioritize justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion within the curriculum, specifically within DPT curriculum?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. And I think what Dr. Magee discussion really resonated with me with regards to accomplices and allyship. And I think no better place could it be than in the academic realm. Now, certainly we face challenges and we face some restrictions depending on where you are. Again, I happen to be in a state that has some pretty strict restrictions, but still, whether you want to defund DI offices, remove personnel, you can't defund the facts. And the facts is that we recognize that minoritized populations suffer disproportionately from various chronic diseases. Dr. Seagraves, you're in the area of maternal and child health, so we recognize the mortality rates for Black women giving birth from cardiovascular diseases, which is certainly something near and dear to my heart. And again, excuse the pun, that cardiovascular diseases, again, disproportionately affects minoritized individuals. So we can't ignore the facts that certainly within our courses, within our coursework, we can discuss these things. We need to make our students aware of these factors. We also need to make our students understand what are the various social and demographic factors or social determinants of health that impact these things. I mean, we would do our students. We would also do our stakeholder, our main stakeholder, which is our patient, a major disservice if we just totally bow down and not talk about these factors that have a severe impact on our patients' well-being. So again, the funding these offices, from the understanding what the laws are, may influence employment, may influence selection of or factors that we use to determine if students are admitted. But you cannot remove the facts, and we certainly, as academicians, need to rise up to the challenge and not shy away from these factors that influence our outcomes, our patients, that we are so endeared to ensure that their well-being is made whole. So again, It all comes down to the benefactors, and it all comes down to ensuring that we provide the best workforce that we can, which means an educated, informed, culturally sensitive workforce. And that's certainly within our purview, despite whatever the laws are put in place.
Beautifully said. Dr. Corvus, would you add to that other opportunities that you're seeing educators doing, that you yourself, your colleagues are already doing to really prioritize JEDI in the curriculum?
Yeah, speaking to the curriculum, I think what I've seen in my own practices and the programs that I work with, and I work with in several, is really that integration piece that Dr. Magee said, right? That it is something that should be embedded in every aspect of what we are teaching, in every aspect of what we are practicing, and to look at it as something that is outside or other, right? That needs to be a separate office or consideration, and then thought like, okay, well, let's look at where this is relevant as opposed to this is always relevant, right? So I think the most progress I've seen in that is that shift in the lens, is that if we look at every single topic we teach, if we look at every single concept we approach with looking at it holistically, right? Our current approach, and look at it in our historical approach to it and say like, all of this is relevant. So that's when I've seen it the most effective, show up in the most effective ways, is that just pure integration, not viewing it as something separate, but looking at where is it already embedded and how can we just elevate what is already there.
So Dr. Richardson, in practical terms, say you're teaching musculoskeletal, in the musculoskeletal realm, and you're teaching a first year PT student, you want to integrate principles. How are you doing that in a practical sense?
Dr. Seeger, your mic cut out for just a second. Do you mind repeating that part of the question, please?
Absolutely, absolutely. And just give me feedback. But in terms of just practical ways of where you're in, Dr. Corvus said, where you're integrating DEI or JEDI principles into the curriculum, what are some practical ways that a musculoskeletal professor would do that?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. There's a lot of really small things, and I think the small things can make a huge difference. And Dr. Magee mentioned in the lecture about the concept of culturally responsive pedagogy, and it's really kind of connecting and making students feel inclusive and meeting them where they are. So it can be as something as using a variety of different types of names and identities in your case examples. So you're not just having certain types of names, but you have a variety of identities that are there. Even for us, we use body charts, which are a significant portion of the musculoskeletal curriculum. On there, we kind of use a body chart that doesn't necessarily have a clearly defined gender. It just needs to have the body parts on it. These are small types of things where it's just that we're making it so that it feels more inclusive and supportive for students. We try to integrate more equitable grading practices. We're trying to make it so that students aren't punished for having a different starting point when they come into the curriculum in our classes. So they get a chance, as Dr. Magee mentioned, it's okay to fail and to not know something at first. The process of learning involves you not knowing things at first. And so sometimes it takes a couple attempts to do that. So there's a lot of small things along those lines where we can make it so that students feel safe, and it's a bold space where they can make mistakes, and that they do start to feel like there's a support and the ability for them to be able to grow into what they need to be. And that comes from making them feel supported and kind of being that wind behind their sails. So if you don't make them feel that way, then students aren't willing to kind of take a risk and put themselves out there. And we know that this is particularly significant in those with those historically marginalized and minoritized identities, whether that be their sexual identity or their racial or ethnic identity. Those students have, as Dr. Magee mentioned and alluded to in that paper, they have less satisfaction. They have a more challenging time when they're in school. And when you can start to address those elements and create a better learning experience for them in school, that, as Dr. Brewer mentioned, is something that will lead to better outcomes for those patients that have those similar identities. All of this really ties into creating a better experience and better outcomes for the patients and the population, which is ultimately the end result of all of these efforts.
Thank you, Dr. Richardson. I think one of the recurring themes I hear, and especially from students who are really concerned with just burnout, being in school, but their future, their financial future. Dr. You spoke about anti-affirmative action activists that are leveraging this Reconstruction era law that was supposed to benefit minority-owned businesses. And so from standpoint, how are DPT educators, Dr. Magee, preparing students from these marginalized backgrounds to be financially sustainable within the physical therapy profession? Salaries, poor reimbursement rates for insurance covered services. What are we doing to set these students up for success in a practical sense?
Was that for me, Dr. Seagraves?
That's for you, Dr. Magee. Yes.
Okay. It cut out there for a second. I think we have to start bringing in individuals to talk about these things. We have to think about what that looks like. I had a conversation with the learner today talking about her debt. And this student is from one of those historically excluded backgrounds. She talked about the value of education to her family. She's the only one to go to college, then to go further. And she said, well, her parents told her that if it was that important, then it would be beneficial and give her something that she could hold on to be sustainable and to have an impact. Then they would take on the debt and they would help her. But they're also thinking about the impact of that. So we talked about what is it to work for, what does a nonprofit look like? What kind of services out there, public service loan forgiveness and other things. And even though that may be under a threat, but we talked about what it is to manage your debt. And we have to start having these conversations. And again, I'm no financial advisor, but I can offer my advice. But we can bring these individuals into our programs, into even our practices, just to begin to think about how we manage just financial literacy. Because again, for some of us, that was not something that was discussed in my house growing up. It was just you save, and then if you buy something, you pay it off before you move on to something else. So to understand educational debt is something else altogether. So I think we have to provide a service. We can't look at education as just something that we come in, we stand up, we give this knowledge, and we allow people to leave. We have to be, or we should be, holistic in every aspect that we do. Again, it is the art. It is how do we help the individuals that are there? Again, what kind of profession do we aspire to be? And what kind of human being and physical therapist do we aspire to be? We should not allow our learners, our students, to leave us broken and damaged in any way. What can we do to add to them? And sometimes we have to spend and invest in their well-being, all aspects of their well-being, be that mental, financial health, because yes, even if I'm in a place where 60% of the students may not have these questions, we have to think about the 40. And if we build for the 40, the 60 will always be better equipped because of it. And that's how I think of it. When I look at how we design our program and think of who is the one person here. And if we're building for that one, surely we're going to encompass the other 90 that are here. But the one person who stands out, or the fewest, it's opposite mind. We can cover the majority, but if we don't think about those who are in the least of the numbers, they're going to be left behind. And I would do anyone a disservice if I didn't think about everyone in my program. So if I think from that least of aspect, then we build towards that. And we do that for offering, again, sessions and lectures around your financial management. We talk about salaries. What does it mean to make $65,000 versus $80,000? How do you save for that? How do you manage that? What does your insurance cover? What are your benefits? What is the compensation package? We bring people in to talk about that. We have business owners come in. We have clinic owners. We bring in the larger corporations to talk about how our learners can think about things. How do you negotiate? Because a lot of times for some of us, it may be the first time we have been faced with having these discussions. And when I always used to say when I was in school, well, I make $0,000 a year. So to offer me 20 seemed like I was getting a huge bump. So I needed somebody to say, that's not enough. You're being underpaid. And just understanding what that means. And then we translate it to, what do you have to do, to be productive in clinic? What do productivity numbers look like? What does it mean? How do you justify your salary here? And then another thing that I try to do for my learners is to say, if you are only using your degree to be a rehab specialist, only using about maybe 60% of your capability. How do you make this work for you? Be an advocate somewhere. Go out and offer to be a consultant. You have more skills and gain from your DPT education that you may be aware of. And here are some ways that you can do that. And then we try to find individuals who are diverse across many different identities and intersections to come in and talk about that. How have they made an impact using social media? And not that they're an influencer, but they may have a podcast. They may be offering this service. They have an interest in sports, and so they want to tie that in. And how do you go beyond just being a rehab professional? You have so much more. You are so much more. And you have to kind of repeat that message, especially for those who haven't been taught that or haven't ever seen examples of those things.
Dr. Corvus, what Dr. Magee just landed on is leveraging skills within the profession to leverage the profession itself. And so with your to round out this conversation, I want us all to speak on this, but how do you inspire other leaders and students now to stay resilient in the fight to improve the health and society with that divine dissatisfaction? What would you say to professionals who are listening to stay resilient in this fight? Dr. Corvus.
Oh, thank you. This is a very difficult question. I sat with this for a long time because I think resilience is sometimes overrated, right? We talk a lot about stay strong, stay strong, stay strong, stay resilient, stay flexible, stay sustainable, right? Like that is where the resilience lies. Think back to what does it take to remain in the place that you want to be? And I would say that resilience doesn't always have to look the same, right? Like continuing to stay where you are, continuing to do what you do, continuing to hold on to the goal that you have without maybe allowing it to evolve might be actually working against you. And so I would say stay flexible, and it's okay to recognize that you need to make a change in order to continue moving forward towards your goals, right? In order to continue making progress. Because again, to what Dr. Magee said, if you're only using, if you're only being a rehab professional, you're only using about 60%, right? You can do so many things, right? Get into committee work, get into local politics, get into, mentoring, not even in physical therapy, right? What other passions do you have in your life, and where can you start pouring yourself into those spaces? Because if you can bring up more people and then be an example, be a guide, you can help to still create a healthier world. You can increase and improve the diversity in physical therapy, but physical therapy can also improve the lives of people outside of our profession, right? That's our goal, right? Transform the world. So that's what I would say.
Dr. Brewer, flexible is the term. Resiliency is overrated. I couldn't agree more. What would you say to listeners today, clinicians, both students, in order to remain flexible, but then resist that complacency to nothing, to succumb to DEI fatigue, if you will? Dr. Brewer.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat just that last part of the question?
Exactly. What would you say to the listeners today to encourage them to resist being complacent, to resist the DEI fatigue?
Got it. Well, I think you have to always constantly reevaluate, reevaluate your goals, reevaluate what you're aiming for. And, I certainly understand DI fatigue. And I think it's important to really sit back and think about, for one, celebrate, your wins, because whether they're big wins or small wins, I think it takes a lot to really make a change in the DI realm. But I think you have to start to look at what are some of the small changes that you can make to chip away at the big picture. I also think, again, one of the things that Dr. Magee mentioned with regards to allyship is, how can we engage individuals who have the interest in DEI in mind, but may not know how to go about and approach it? How can we bring them more in the fold to get them to be accomplices? So I think if everyone is involved in doing just even small bits of work, whatever that work may be, whether it's mentoring someone, whether it's spreading the word about physical therapy in various communities. Again, no matter how restrictive the place that you're in, like I said, I'm in Texas. We certainly can do those things, and just individuals about what physical therapy is as a profession. So imagine if we can get just several individuals doing something just on a small scale, how much that can add up and magnify itself. But then also, by the same token, engage these individuals to periodically reflect on what they're doing. And if there's times where you need to pivot and do something else, or times where you just may need to take a break, and that's fine too, because it is hard work. And sometimes it can also be, in many cases, lonely work. So if we can get as many people on board with doing just bits of tasks to improve the DEI landscape, I think we'll see a tremendous change in that regard. What's the old saying? If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go make a big impact, you go slow and bring as many people with you. I know it's probably a long-winded way for that particular saying, but what I'm trying to say is that you need to surround yourself with people who have DI interests in mind, and bring them into the fold and show them whatever they're willing to do, that it can make an impact.
Thank you, Dr. Brewer. Dr. Richardson, Magee left us with a call to action to revolutionize the profession. Leave the listeners, if you can, with some action that you want them to take away from tonight's discussion.
So I know it cut out the last part. You said with a message for them to take away from the discussion. Is that what you said?
Exactly.
I think that it really kind of plays off of all these things. I really like it just comes down to really kind of sticking this out and continuing to push forward. Dr. Brewer and Dr. Corvus just kind of mentioned that, you need to be flexible. We talk about resiliency, and I would say I completely agree that resilience is overrated. When you really think about it, if the systems work the way they're supposed to, we wouldn't have to be so damn resilient all the time if things were more equitable and we were more supported in those spaces. But I think that a big thing when you get lost is really thinking about your why. Like, why am I doing this? And whether you're thinking about Lynda Woodruff, you're thinking about different patients, you're thinking about your family, really your why can help keep you grounded on why you're doing these types of things. And to Dr. Brewer's point is finding other like-minded people. You're not doing this alone. And when you find and connect with those other individuals, it can really make this a lot easier to continue to push in this fight, because there's a lot of resistance. And as history has told us, whenever we make some progress, there's always going to be a backlash and a pushback to that. You have to be ready for that. And you can find that support in finding other individuals and remembering your why to be able to do that. And then I think lastly, and this is a big thing, especially here this kind of generationally, is practicing self-care. Sometimes the best way to remain resilient is to step back and say that I can't handle this right now. I don't have the bandwidth to be able to do this. And sometimes rather than making progress, you're winning just by staying in the game. So you got to take some time back. And if you need to say like, no, I can't help with this, or asking for help, sometimes that's kind of the best way forward, is just to try to stay in the game, and rather than trying to take on too much. Because we've seen from a number of different sources, and we've all probably experienced or seen this in other people, is burnout is something that's very real. And so the more that you try to take on, the less support that you have, you can really reach that point. And so I think that the takeaway here is to try to stay in the proverbial game. And that's by using all of these different types of sources so we can remain resilient and continue to make progress despite all of the seeming pushback and resistance that we might feel.
Excellent. Dr. Magee, will you bring us home, please?
I would say I agree with everything that has been said. And I asked myself, first being honest with yourself. I started this talk off with saying that, I had to question whether I still wanted to do this. I knew where I was in admitting those emotions. First, I thought it was admitting defeat, but no, it was just admitting my reality. And how do I get back was go through and reflect. And I think that's something we all should do. And not just focusing on burnout, but compassion fatigue, which I think is more dangerous for those who are in the helping professions. And because the potential for that means that I've lost my ability to be empathetic. And we all in this profession have the honor to walk beside. We don't fix people. We don't fix injuries, but we walk beside people in their discomfort, in their life-changing moments. And that is an honor. And so I come away from this to ask myself, am I satisfied with anyone being left behind? And that is my rural white student from Iowa, but that is also the Black student from East St. Louis who is just trying to have a chance to make a difference, and anybody in between. So satisfied with good enough, and I can't be. You shouldn't be. That's not how we transform. That's not how we revolutionize. Take care of yourself mentally, physically, and emotionally. Find the thing that spurs you on. Tap into that and remember that you are making change every day, even when it doesn't feel like it. To be the first, to be the only, or otherwise different is always hard. But there are those of us out there with you. We build community, we build coalition. We are your accomplice. I'm going to drive the getaway car for you. These people here, all of you. And that's, I think, where you find your ability to go on. So I'll leave with that.
Panelists, thank you so much. I speak on behalf of our audience and this panel of our esteemed colleagues to thank you for inspiring lecture. To our panel, I want to thank you for sharing on how we can personally and collectively be the catalyst for revolution in the physical therapy profession and for the health of our society. To those of you who are listening, thank you for your attention. We hope that the legacy of Dr. Lynda D. Woodruff tonight's lecture and our discussion are a catalyst for you to personally and collectively make a positive improvement on the world around us. Every time.